this class. So we'll be looking at the external environment. We started with lecture 1, and lecture 1 was generally an overview of all the issues that we'll be learning as far as strategic management or planning is concerned. Lecture 2 is where we started with the strategic management stages or process itself. So we learned about the fact that if you are into strategic management, you have to first and foremost clearly spell out the vision or the purpose of the organization. And the purpose of the organization consists of the vision, the mission, and the values by which the organization will actually operate. All right. It is very, very important to get the vision clear. Then you get your mission. Then you know the values that the organization must have to anchor the vision and the mission that you have as an organization. All right. We looked at examples of vision and mission statements and how these statements are supposed to be crafted. The next thing as a strategist is to understand your environment. Okay, so there are forces that influence or factors that will influence how the organization will become successful. Some of these forces or factors may be outside of the organization, and some of these factors may be within the organization. So the factors or the forces outside of the organization that can influence how effectively the organization can operate, and therefore determine either the success or the failure of the organization is what is known as the external environment. All right. So this chapter is about the external environment. We want to look at the factors or the forces that makes up the external environment. And then after we are done with the external, lecture 4, we'll be looking at the internal environment, the forces within the organization itself that as a manager you must pay attention to in order to stay successful and relevant in the competition. All right, so the learning objectives, we'll be looking at what is known as the PESTEL framework. Very soon we'll see the details of what the PESTEL stands for. The PESTEL process, black swans and structural breaks. We'll be looking at industry life cycle. We'll be looking at the 5 competitive forces. We'll be looking at 2 other concepts known as hyper competition and strategic fit. Okay, I just must add that the external environment consists of 2 aspects. We have what is known as the macro environment, okay, and we have what is known as the micro environment. So the macro environment contains variables that are a bit or quite remote from the organization. Both the micro and the macro are factors outside of the organization, but we have some of the factors that their impact are so remote from the organization that they are considered to be macro factors. Okay, there are also others, even though they are outside of the organization, they tend to have an immediate and direct impact on the operations of the organization. And that is the micro or directly operative environment as far as the external environment is concerned. So the PESTEL framework will actually help us to appreciate the macro environment within the context of the external environment. All right. And this other 2, industry life cycle or industry analysis, as well as our understanding of the 5 competitive forces model, will help us to appreciate the micro environment. So the 2 work together to explain the external environment of a business, okay, of an organization. So what we have here is a combination of both the macro and the micro external environment. So I just want you to note that as we proceed. So an organization's external environment consists of the conditions outside the organization, especially those that influence the intensity of competition. So as I said, the conditions, the factors, the variables that are outside of the organization, and they affect how successful or otherwise an organization can operate, is what is termed as the external environment. Okay, many changes are difficult to determine or to identify, and their consequences are often uncertain and even unknowable. All right. So when you're dealing with the external environment, you're dealing with the unknown or uncontrollable factors as far as the organization is concerned. The internal environment are things that will normally be within the range of management of an organization. But when you're dealing with the external environment, most of the things that will happen there are things that management will not be able to control. The best you can do is to learn how to adapt. Okay, you have to change yourself and position yourself to be able to ride on the changes that will occur in the external environment. But you cannot successfully and actively seek to influence the external environment as compared to the internal environment of an organization. Okay. So the personal framework, if you have business background, you will have heard it before. So it's just an acronym that stands for these variables: political trends, economic trends, social trends, technological trends, environmental trends, and legal trends. Okay, if you are into business or you are an organization, it is very, very important that you pay attention to these trends or factors. All right. So we'll be looking at them as one after the other, but you have to know that these are variables or forces outside of the organization that if you don't pay attention to them, they can influence the success or otherwise of your business. Okay, so if you pick political trends, we're basically talking about the governance system, the kind of laws and regulations that will be coming from the politicians or the government of the day. You want to pay attention to these things because they can influence and affect how successful you become. Okay, economic trends. You want to pay attention to the economic environment, the indicators, inflation, exchange rates. If you are not into business, you may just think they are numbers, but they will have a way of impacting how successful or otherwise you become as a business. Okay, the social trends, you want to pay attention to issues like the beliefs, the culture, the taste and preferences, the lifestyle, and so on and so forth, the demographics of wherever you are operating, because these things can influence the success or otherwise of your organization. You want to pay attention to the type of technology, the trends in technology. Okay, and I think somewhere I mentioned Nokia in the course of my lectures, the fact that they failed to actually adapt to the changes in the operating system or the type of technology that was required in their industry. And there are many, many other companies that have died off or that have gone out of business because they failed to take advantage of the changes or to ride on the changes as far as the technological environment of the industry is concerned. Okay, you want to pay attention to environmental trends. So there is more concern now with regards to how consumers are conscious about companies not affecting negatively the environment within which they operate. Okay, so we have environmental lists, NGOs, and other advocates, and consumers are conscious. If you fail to respect issues like pollution, polluting water bodies, destroying lands, and so on and so forth, it may lead to some consumers boycotting your product or services. So you want to pay attention to environmental trends as much as possible. Legal trends are very close to the political trends. Most of the time, these guys have the ability to influence the laws and regulations. But whatever be the case, pay attention to the laws and regulations of your environment, right? And it's not just about the laws. You want to pay attention to the quality of enforcement institutions in the country or jurisdictions where you are operating, okay? What is the behavior of the police? What's the attitude of judges when cases gets to court? Are contracts respected in that particular country? Are you sure that your patents rights, your intellectual properties will be protected if you are operating in that particular jurisdiction? So you want to pay attention to the legal trends, because these things can influence how successful or otherwise you become as a business. Okay, so that is that for the pestle framework. Let's dive a bit into each of this. So the political trends. Competition in many areas is shaped by government policies and regulatory decisions. That is why you have to pay attention to these trends. And recently, if you have paid attention to news, I think there have been a lot of developments in the front of businesses. One is the trade minister trying to, what was it? Is it limit importation of certain products? Can you remember that? Okay. He had a list that the parliament sent a bill to the presidency, and they wanted to pass a law that will restrict the importation of certain products. And that if you wanted to import them, you needed a clearance from the minister of trade in order to be able to import. Straight away, you saw the reaction of the, what is the trade union? What's the name of that trade union? That union, please help me. Guta, right? Yes, Ghana Union of Trade. Hey, what is the full name? Meaning?
Ghana Union of Traders Association.
Ghana Union of Traders Association. All right. Straight away, they have to react. Okay. If you kept silent, it has the way of influencing your business. Maybe some of them are into rice importation, oil, and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, a minister through parliament wanted to pass a law leading to the collapse of some of these businesses. All right. So you want to pay attention. Government policies. Just yesterday, too, there was a news item from, I think they are medical doctors in the area of pharmacy or something like that. And they are contesting, once again, a ban on importation of certain drugs. All right. They said the World Bank said they should only ban about 38, but the government is now talking about 130 or so drugs that they will not be allowed to import. Okay, so they were also on the news advocating against that particular regulatory policy. All right, so you have to stay on top of the political trends in any jurisdiction. Sometimes you may not be able to cause a change, but once you know that this is the direction of the government, then you have to find a way to adjust so that you don't get into trouble. Okay, so most businesses will be affected by government policies and regulatory decisions, and you want to pay attention to that. Okay, but substantially, as a business, you want to operate in countries where democracy exists and thrives. Okay, so civilian governments, through constitutions, tend to establish a rule of law that checks the arbitrary use of state coercive power. So if you find yourself in a country that is more democratic, you may be certain that there will be rule of law. All right. No matter how bad it is, I think it will be better to operate in a country with a civilian government or with democracy than in a military regime. We'll be looking at that very soon. So part of the political trends is to pay attention to whether the fact that whether the country is being governed by a civilian government or military government. In other words, whether they believe and practice democracy or otherwise. All things being equal, civilian governments are likely to operate by the rule of law, okay? And that will check states' coercive powers, all right? And I must say that even with civilian governments, we've seen how governments and politicians have tried to abuse the rights of people. How much more military governments? Okay. Next, civilian governments may guarantee business representation in state business relations and institutional arrangements such as laws and acts of parliament. So if you find yourself in a jurisdiction where a governance system is by civilian government, they may allow businesses to make representations, to have a voice when it comes to determining laws and regulations about how businesses should be run in a country. Okay. They may protect businesses and individual rights of associations and property, among others. So the nutshell is that it is safer for businesses to operate in democratic jurisdictions than to operate in military governments. Okay. So military governments normally jettison the constitution and rule by degrees, which do not necessarily include the interests and views of the business community. So as much as you can, you want to avoid regions, countries where democracy is not respected, and actually locate in countries, as I've said, where they respect the rights of people, the country is governed by rule of law, and so on and so forth. Okay. With economic trends, you want to pay attention to resource use and prices. Okay. Because when the inputs that you use are scarce or not available, all things being equal, the prices will go up. Okay. And the other things beyond the availability of the resources, if these other variables like interest rate, exchange rate, inflation rates are not in the right levels, obviously to affect the price of the inputs or the resources that you need to operate. So you pay attention to the availability of resources and their prices, because whether you like it or not, that will feed into your cost of production. All right. You want to pay attention to interest rates. Okay. Business, one of the leverage that businesses use to expand and grow is through the acquisition of loans. Okay. So as you go for funding, there is a price attached to that. How much are you paying for that? That's the interest rate. If it is high, obviously that then will increase your cost of production. That will lead to you charging your goods at higher prices, and all things being equal, it may reduce the demand or make you very uncompetitive, because you're dealing with a competitive environment. So if your prices are high and say foreign substitutes are cheaper, then obviously you're pricing yourself out of the market. So interest rates, you want to pay attention to that. Okay. And if you have been listening to CEOs and owners of businesses, this is a major concern for them. This and exchange rates. Okay. For those that are into importation of their raw materials, they are concerned so much about that, because it tends to have some serious impacts on their cost of operations. All right. You want to pay attention to disposable income. All right. How much money is available for people to spend or consume with? Okay. So if the amount of disposable income is low, what it means is that their purchasing power will also be less. And because you want to either provide a product or service and you want people to buy, once they don't have enough, they cannot afford to buy enough of those products, even if they need that. So you want to pay attention to disposable income, okay? And disposable here is not being used lightly. It could be that when you check the salaries of things in the country, they are being paid well, but that is not enough. You have to look at issues like taxes. You have to look at inflation, such that even though the gross salary could be high, but after catering for all other expenses, the money that will be left for personal consumption will normally be very low. Okay, so it's not just the gross figures, but what is left for the person to actually spend is what you should be interested in. Okay, then you want to be mindful of the economic growth generally. If the economy is expanding, all things being equal, it means that jobs are available, people have more money in their pockets, and so they may be able to spend more and buy your products or deal in your services. Okay, then you want to be mindful of inflation. Inflation is they have direct relationship. All right, you want to be mindful of this because it can eat into disposable income. It can also affect the cost of production because resource use, inputs that you need will go up. and so on and so forth. So if you're into business, oil industry, whatever type of business, you want to pay attention to the economy of that particular country. Okay. Recent occurrences should make this point very clear. When the cedi kept depreciating, we saw what happens to the price of goods. Why? Because rational businessmen will not even sell based on the prevailing exchange rates. All right. They will price it anticipating that the cedi will depreciate further. So you could buy something in the morning, and by afternoon, the price have actually gone up. All right, because of the depreciation of the cedi. If you are not into business, you might think they are greedy. They just want to make money. But that was the rational thing to do then. If you kept your prices based on how much you bought those inputs or whatever, those goods, by the time you finish selling, your profit and every money that you have made will not be able to even import the same amount of goods or products. Okay. So because the economy wasn't good, the price of things kept going up and up and up. So if you're into business and you want to succeed and survive, pay attention to economic trends. What I just said was applicable to oil firms as well. Okay, if you went to the pumps, they were not charging based on how much they exchanged the cedi for the dollar. There were actually projections as to further depreciation of the cedi. So prices at the pumps were not a reflection of the reality of the prevailing exchange rate, but those guys anticipated something further, that the worst could happen. And you don't want to sit down and sell at prevailing exchange rates. By the time you finish, both your profits plus the amount that you use, your costs, will not be able to help you import the same quantity of oil again. Okay, so you want to pay attention to economic trends if you survive or do well in business. Okay, then you pay attention to social trends. So issues like the demographic, the social and lifestyle trends of the people where you are operating. It's very, very important. Okay, if you're dealing with any product at all, that product could be targeting a particular demographic class or group. Okay, you may be dealing with, say, products that are for the youth, the aged, for babies. The important thing is to know the numbers and whether the numbers support the type of product that you want to sell. Okay, if yours is just about the general population, that is also demographic. You want to know whether the population of the country is increasing, is decreasing, and so on and so forth. If yours is about age, you want to find whether they are becoming more aged people in that society because of the type of product that you are selling. All right. If they are becoming more aged, then there is some types of products may do better in those countries than when you have more youthful population. The same is true. If you are dealing with products that are for the youth, you may be able to do far well if you have a more youthful population than an aged population. So the demographics, very, very important, all right, in business, in order to do well. The social and lifestyle of people. It has something to do with income levels, the taste and preferences, all right? It gets to a point where some goods, you know what we call inferior goods, right? It doesn't necessarily mean they are of poor quality, but it's just that the taste, whatever, income levels have come up and lifestyles have changed, and therefore they will no longer be interested in those type of products or goods. Okay, so you need to know, but that is just at the good side. There may be instances where the economy is so bad, things are worse, people don't have money, and so their lifestyle, their taste and preferences could change, and they will now be looking for the inferior goods instead of the luxurious goods and so on and so forth. So you want to pay attention. If you're into the fashion industry, pay attention to changes happening in those industries. So such that if you don't follow the trend, you are likely to lose out a big time. When the trend is at a high pace, it's almost like somebody have made an announcement that this is how people should dress now. All right. This is the lifestyle that people should have now. So you want to pay attention to that. This is applicable to almost all industries. If you look at the music industry, there will normally be a style or some type of music that is trending at any point in time, and you want to pay attention to these trends if you want to survive. Okay. You want to pay attention to group identities and gender roles. All right. Are we becoming a society where males are supposed to behave and do the things that females do, or we are still the traditional type of organization? All right. In spite of all the influences from the West, have we stuck our grounds and our gender roles and identities are still the same? Okay. Once we merging them, that can influence the kind of products and services that you can sell and so on and so forth. I don't want to go into details because it's culturally sensitive. All right. Then, so that moves us to the next one, the national cultures. You want to pay attention to that. And it has something to do with the ethics, the morality, and the expectations of wherever you find yourself. All right. Recently, I think I mentioned it, right? I think it's my other class. The example, if you have seen it, there was a video of a young man who is into goat rearing in Brown who was given, I think, is it 2 months or 2 weeks to evacuate or stop that business in that particular area. Why? Because it was a taboo to rear goats in that part of the region of Ghana. All right. So you want to pay attention to the belief systems. Don't say, oh, as for me, I've been to university. It's not about your educational level. The belief system, some are so entrenched, and people will not just let go because you are enlightened. So pay attention to the cultures, the ethics, the morality, the expectations of the people wherever you are operating. All right. So it goes deeper. Issues like even colors when it comes to packaging of your products. There are jurisdictions. What we know is that when people are celebrating, they wear white. When they are mourning, they wear black. Okay. But there are jurisdictions where the reverse is also the case. When people are in celebrating mood, they wear black. And when they are mourning, they wear white. So if you don't know these dynamics and just assume that everywhere in the world is the same, you are likely to get into trouble when it comes to international business. So know the ethics, know the morality and the beliefs, the culture of jurisdictions and countries as you undertake your business. Okay. Then technological trends, I think I've dealt with that also. You have to pay attention to the technology. It can impact on new and development change, technological change on resources, organizational behavior, products and services, and operations. So technology can impact these things, all right? The use of resources, organizational behavior. Okay, so now I like the behavior, but I just want to touch on that. So with advancement of technology, if you're into HR, you need to know that there may be certain kind of works that people can do without necessarily even coming to the office physically. All right. So if you love to control and direct people and command people, technology may impact that because somebody can work from home and do not necessarily have to be at the workplace. And so you need to change your psyche and know that the way to manage organizations have changed because technology has made it possible for people to behave differently than we know it. All right. For products and services, it's obvious. It can make you to be able to produce or render services and products faster, cheaper, and of higher quality. So you need to pay attention to technology. Okay, the prevalence of smartphones and price scanning applications. It has affected marketing as well. All right. When it comes to pricing, for example, it may help in promotion, advertisements, especially using social media. The gadgets on phones can help businesses in that. But the problem also is that consumers and customers can now easily compare prices. Okay, if you tell them you are selling something at this, they will just go online with their phones and check the price of other competitive offerings to see whether what you're selling, the price at which you are selling, is reasonable or not. All right, so you just have to pay attention how technology can impact your operations as a business. And then when it comes to the piece, your product, your pricing, your distribution, and so on and so forth, you find a way to improve them using the trends in technology. And there are several businesses that have gone away because they failed to match up with the trends in technology. I think we mentioned Nokia. There was this other, is it Koda or something? Is it Koda, the company that is into, I think, cameras or stuff like that? All right. So now it's very rare. People can just use their phones and do all of those things. All right. So it's very rare to get people buying a typical camera if they are not professionals, and so on and so forth. So you have to pay attention to the trends in technology. All right. Then there is also environmental trends. So environmental trends include quality of life, sustainability, and recycling of resources, global warming and pollution caused by plastic packaging and intensive farming, and depletion of world resources. These are becoming concerns that consumers have. And as I indicated earlier, if you operate without any respect for the environment, you are likely to face some sanctions or boycotts. Okay, consumers have become very active and concerned about respect for the environment. Not too long ago, if you've heard, I think Ghana was cocoa or something was blacklisted, or there was a fear of it being blacklisted because of this galamsey activity. All right. Did you follow that news item? It became a major issue. The fact that our cocoa may not be accepted in the developed country or world because of the fact that they may be infected or affected by these chemicals that are used for illegal mining. All right. And then there is this issue that was about child labor and things of that nature. And there was a ban on Ghana cocoa or something of that sort. Okay, so consumerism and the activism of customers and consumers is making it very, very important that as you operate and seek to make money, especially if you're in the extractive sector, such as the oil, the downstream sector, you want to pay attention to how you pollute the water bodies around the communities where you are operating. Okay, if they don't boycott it, they may take guns and cutlasses and come and sack you from your operations. You may just search for some documentaries about Nigeria, all right, where the northern side of Nigeria and the militant groups that have come up because of their concerns as to how the environment is being polluted and the fact that they are not being employed and so on and so forth. So you want to pay attention to environmental trends. I think yesterday to business news, Guinness Ghana Limited is talking about changing their plastics. They now want to use plain plastic bottles and so on and so forth. And the reason is because they want it to be easier to recycle those products instead of sticking to the old colored bottles and so on and so forth. So customers and companies are becoming more conscious about the environment. And if you are operating any business, that is something you cannot overlook. You cannot overlook the environmental trends. Okay. Then we have the legal trends. I said it's very related to political trends, all right? But generally, you want to pay attention to the laws and regulatory actions of a country, the standards that are in place, The border requirements, if you're into international business, immigration issues should matter to you. Labor regulations, all right? I just spoke about child labor, but there could be much bigger issues like minimum wage, the rights of workers and employees, the rights of employers. Don't just go into business without knowing some of these things, okay? Because then you may start and realize that, no, given the labor laws of the country, you may not be able to meet all the demands of your workers or employees. So it's very, very important to know the laws of a particular jurisdiction before operating there, all right? And if you are currently there, know the laws. But far more importantly, you want to pay attention to the enforcement regimes in those countries. Okay, so what we have, the problem we have in Ghana and most developing countries is that if you come around, you see laws that deals with very good laws that deals with all these issues. But when it comes to enforcement, that is where there is a problem. All right. So once again, you need to understand this, whether there's flexibility. There are countries that companies will not dare flout any of these things, okay, because they know the consequences. And they also know countries where even though some of these things are available, they can still get away with it. All right. So you need to know those dynamics. Okay. I think not too long ago, we've heard about stories of Lebanese companies and so on, what are employers and how they treat Ghanaians and so on and so forth. I don't want to go into it because the examples are not too good, okay? And yet, nothing really happens, okay? So you need to know, and probably they are bold to do that because they know nothing will happen if they treat their workers or their employees that way in their own country. Okay. So that is that for the PESTEL framework. If you're a business manager or manager of any organization, you want to pay attention to this external environment. There are issues not within your organization, but if you fail to pay attention to them, they will influence how successful or otherwise you become. Okay. Any questions before we move to the PESTEL process? We are still on the PESTEL framework, but the next issue is about the PESTEL process. Any questions? Any contribution?
No problem.
Yes, we have 11 people or 10 people here. Any other before I continue? One female. So I like calling. Monica, are you still online?
Yes, sir.
Good. Have you followed so far?
Yes, sir, I have.
Good.
Very insightful.
Once you are okay, the rest, they can go and die. We just have one female.
It's a privilege.
Yes, only one female. You don't want to die, Mustafa. Okay. That's fine. So we can continue. Let's look at the PESTEL process. All right. So we've looked at the framework. So how do you go about it? What are the things you want to pay attention to as you analyze your framework, the PESTEL framework? So the PESTEL process should be kept as simple as possible, with the bigger picture always kept central. All right. So when you are engaged in this environmental scanning thing, you must know the aim for all that. All right. You don't want to be a politician. You don't want to be an activist. Your interest is how to avoid the impact, how these things could negatively impact your operations. The other thing you'll be scanning or looking out for are whether there are any opportunities for you to take advantage of. Okay, so that is, I think I should have said it from the onset. So that is the main reason why you need to do environmental. You have to study your external environment. The external environment will let you know the threats that your business is likely to be confronted with, okay, or the opportunities that exist in that environment for you to be able to take advantage of. So that should be at the forefront whenever you engage in the pestle framework or pestle analysis. All right. You must have the bigger picture in mind. Am I seeing threats that I have to position myself to avoid? Or am I seeing opportunities that, once again, I must position myself well to take advantage of? All right. PESTEL is a useful framework to check and determine strategic priorities, since managers are encouraged to look beyond their organization and industry. Okay, so you want to pay attention to these things because, as we've already established, they have or they are likely to have significant impact on your organization. So you don't want to overlook them. Okay, right. A good pestle should go deeper enough to consider the root causes behind trends. Things are not always as they appear. That is also very, very important. Okay, if you're into pestle analysis or in business, you always have to be mindful of the reasons why certain things happen, especially when we come to government policies and directives. All right. So if you've paid attention, one of the rebuttals that came when the trade minister wanted this bill on restrictions on imports was the fact that they said it will breed corruption. They wanted to give jobs or whatever to MPP members or the members of the ruling political class, and so on and so forth. So on the surface, the argument of the government was to minimize importation in order to strengthen the CD, and so on and so forth. Okay, but the critics were able to go deeper to know the real reason. All right. And it was almost obvious that if it was the trade minister that should give approval for you to be able to import, then all things being equal, the approval will likely be given more to MPP business people than NDC business people. All right. So you have to know the root causes and deal with them aside. If you look at the issues from the surface, you will not really know why certain policies and certain laws comes to force. Okay. The same applies to, I think, was it 2019 thereabout, when there was this cleanup, okay, at the banking sector. Okay, so the argument that was put forth by government is that the banking sector is weak, minimum capital requirements were low, and therefore it had to be raised, blah, blah, blah. Some banks were collapsed, and so on and so forth. Okay, once again, if you're listening to critics, it goes beyond that. All right, and the perception out there is that it is because some minister, and here finance minister, felt threatened by some local banks and wanted to find a way to get them out of business. Whether it's true or not, we can't tell, but it's basically the fact that if you're into pestle analysis or framework analysis, don't just take things on the surface. There could be deeper reasons why some factors are happening in the external environment. Once you get the root causes, the reason why you need the root causes is to be able to know how to deal with the problem. Okay, if you deal with just the symptoms, you will not be able to deal with the problems well. So know the real reasons why behind it. For example, if it is a political reason and the government of the day just want to get you out of whatever business, then you need to be thinking about how to fold up yourself and cut your losses. Because no matter how you try, they may come out with something else to cripple your business. Okay, so you need to know the real reasons behind some of these changes in the external environment so that you can really position yourself well to deal with them. Okay. Then strategies should avoid information overload. Okay, so if you pick the things that we looked at, there are so many things happening in the environment, such that if you are not strategic, if you are not careful, you'll spend all your time, even just the economic environment. There are so many things there. Okay, so to avoid information overload, you need to pick on information or data that is relevant for your industry and the type of company that you are in order to avoid information overload. Okay, otherwise you'll be overwhelmed by the kind of information that you will find in doing the PESTEL framework. Okay, Monica, I can see your hand.
Hey, please, I wanted to find out what is the ideal approach to pin down the root causes or factors that affect the business, given that the symptoms of the situation most often will mimic the root cause?
Yeah, so we can't have a direct answer to it. It will depend on the variable, right? And so many other factors. I just gave you some of the examples. And these examples, I'm not saying they are facts, but these are the things that will affect. Okay. So if government say the banking sector is weak, so we have to do a cleanup. And some people were not able to raise the capital, and so on and so forth. And so they were collapsed. If you're an outsider, you'll think that the government is doing that which is right, isn't it? Okay. But those that are deep into the area will really know, assuming they are correct. Okay. They will really know the motive. So how to know the real reason really will depend upon the factor and the issue of the day. Okay. So it will be very difficult to give specific answers as to, for every policy, for every change, that there could be the surface reason and there could be the real reason for that. Okay. So for example, if we even pick when COVID came, right? If you followed Manasseh's stories, it's rational that COVID has come. Government should try and control it and so on and so forth. So governments all over the world were looking for ways to deal with it. But in the same COVID and whatever situation, people were also trying to take advantage of the situation. So one story that Manasseh did was the spraying thing about markets and other places, that based on WHO requirements and recommendations and health experts' advice, that was not necessary at that point in time. Okay. So what on the surface, the government will project that, yes, we want to control COVID, but beneath that, there could be real reasons why the spraying thing contracts were given out and so on and so forth. Okay. So as for the root causes, it varies. It may depend on the situation. The important thing is that if you find yourself at that level, you need to get your sources right. That will feed you with information with regards to the real reasons behind some decisions. I hope that point is clear. But the main thing is that don't just pay attention to the surface. You, as a strategist, you have to know the root causes of some problems so that you can deal with them better. Is that fine?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate.
Okay. Right. Then issues should be strategic. So what should warrant your attention is not operational issues, but strategic issues. I think yesterday or lecture 1, I made you guys to understand. Operational issues are day-to-day stuffs. Strategic are issues that have long-term implications. So in the PESTEL analysis and framework, you want to pay attention to issues that have long-term implications and not the day-to-day things of an organization. Already, you've been advised to avoid information overload, okay? And pay attention. So the way to do that is to pay attention to only issues that are strategic, things that have long-term impact and implications on your operations, not day-to-day management stuff. All right. Next point is very, very close to that. And I think the other points as well. There should be concentration on those factors and issues of most relevance to driving change. So you don't bother yourself with everything that you hear about. All right. Otherwise, your analysis will not be right. In fact, you waste so much time and you will not be able to get any important decision made. So pay attention to only factors that are relevant. And relevance here most of the time depends on your industry or the type of company that you are operating in. Okay. So if you look at, for example, the CD depreciation, all right, most businesses suffered as a result of that. Why? Because most businesses are import driven. Okay, you have to import, and by virtue of the fact that you have to import, you need to convert your cedis into dollars. So if you have to buy dollar at a higher price, what it means is that you need more cedis, and that will put pressure on your business. Okay, but have we paid attention to the reverse side? Those that are actually into exportation and earning dollars. Okay, so for those that were actually exporting a lot of their products outside of this country to jurisdictions that they can earn higher or better currencies than the cedi, they were actually happy and maybe enjoying during this season. Because then when they get their dollars, they may now have to convert that into cedis in order to buy their inputs locally. And therefore, the inputs became cheaper because they could earn dollars and convert the dollars into cedis. So when everybody is crying, don't just follow suit. You want to pay attention. How relevant is that variable to my type of industry? All right. Earlier on, I was using the example of, say, inferior goods and luxury goods. And I was trying to explain that if the economy is bad, yes, generally, most businesses will be in trouble. Disposable income is low. Generally, most businesses will be in trouble. But yeah, if you've read economics, our friend with some economic background, yes, we are told that that era or that time is where people that deal in inferior goods are likely to make more money. Okay, because people don't have money, they will go for the inferior goods instead of the luxurious or the ordinary goods that they will usually buy. All right. So the analysis should be based on what is most relevant. And in defining what is most relevant, you have to know your type of industry and the type of company that you are operating in. That will determine whether you should also follow suit and cry, or you should see that as an opportunity to take advantage of. Okay. Good. Let's look at any questions before we look at the next. Black swans and structural breaks. Any questions on the pestle process? So pestle process is like advice or some guidelines that you have to follow as you do the pestle analysis. Are there any questions before we move to black swans and structural breaks?
No questions, please.
Okay. I've heard Mustafa. Monica, are you okay?
Yes, Doc.
Good. Once you are okay, we can continue. Okay. So the idea of this environmental scanning and trying to understand your external environment, we said, is to identify opportunities and also to find out whether there are some threats so you can position yourself well to avoid that. Okay. But the black swans and structural breaks simply talks about the fact that in spite of all the analysis that you may have done, it is still possible that some event will occur that you never thought about and could bring about very serious like changes in the industry or the economy that you are operating in. Okay. But the conclusion of this whole thing is that in spite of the fact that you may not be able to get everything in place, as in being right in predicting whatever may happen to all of the factors in the external environment, it still makes sense to do this environmental scanning and industrial analysis thing because it helps you to be better prepared than somebody who never at all attempted to understand the influence of the external environment. I don't know whether I'm clear. Okay, so the structural breaks is basically saying that some event may occur that would disrupt all the strategic planning that you've done over the period because nobody actually anticipated that event to occur. All right, so pestle analysis is primarily about monitoring and reviewing longer term trends, but there are also single events that cannot be easily foreseen. Those are structural breaks that subvert trends and change existing behavioral patterns. So example in our recent times is COVID-19. So black swans, just like COVID-19, was some health issue or something that happened in time past. And that is why this subheading is named that way. But in recent history, what we can use as an example is COVID-19, all right? It just happens, and it has never happened at all in the world, right? That the whole world, you just have to stay wherever you are. If you were in US, be there, because no plane is moving. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's something that I don't think any prophet was even able to predict that. Okay. They saw everything else but COVID. All right. So these are things that, and businesses, when they were shut down all over the world, no matter your strategic planning, no matter the analysis, you couldn't sell, you couldn't import, you couldn't do anything. In fact, you were actually thinking about your health instead of thinking about profit. Okay. So there are things that will happen in spite of all the analysis that will change the structure of the industry or the business that you are involved in. And I think COVID-19 presented that. Okay. If you look locally, beside COVID-19, I think in our recent history is this thing, what do you call it? Domestic DDEP, Domestic Debt Exchange Program. Okay, in the financial sector, and if you're into investment and things like that, it is something that has never happened. So for those of us that teach in business schools, and when you're teaching things related to investment, you'll be advising students they should invest, and they should start with government bonds or securities, because they have what? No risks or something of that sort. Okay, then all of a sudden, we have an experience where government is now saying, I can't pay your interest, I can't even pay your bonds, and so on and so forth. So that is an example. In spite of all the planning, when people were thinking about risk-free investments, what they will advise their clients to do is to buy government bonds and government T-bills. Okay. But this was the case where even pensioners that we should have been more sympathetic to couldn't even get their interest rate paid on time, and so on and so forth. So these two are examples of what we mean by structural breaks. Okay. Financial analysts and people with banking experience and financial consultants almost appeared stupid, right? Because you've advised and counseled people that these are risk-free areas, and your investment strategies and everything was based on the fact that government securities were risk-free. Then all of a sudden this event happens. How will you explain yourself after that? And my worry then was how to even convince students and encourage students to get into investment once again, because our main trump card then was that government securities were risk-free. And so as a student, you could start from there. Okay. So these are examples of structural breaks, events that radically changes an industry and how things are perceived in that particular industry. Okay. So when it happens, organizations generally will have to rethink their purpose and overall strategy. They are very, very disruptive, especially with COVID-19. And if you were into the hospitality industry, more specifically, if you had a hotel or a guest house, you will have felt it. All right. People were no longer interested. They said, be at home. What are you going to do at a hotel? People were no longer traveling. Hotel bed sheets and everything became scary. Okay. So you needed to be thinking about whether you have to continue with this business at all, or just sell it somewhere and be free. Okay. So when they happen, it causes management and firms to rethink their purpose and overall strategy, because everything is thrown overboard. Okay. If our DDP10, the whole of data bank, okay, they had to close their offices. Some of their employees were assaulted physically, and they had to just shut down, because it has never happened before that your whatever your investment will be due and you'll not even hear from the firms that you have invested in and so on and so forth, right? So it's something very, very serious. Some are so potentially catastrophic that a societal and perhaps a world response are required. So once again, we notice that the World Health Organization has to take over this COVID response thing, okay, giving day-to-day accounts, or if you want, timely accounts as to what is happening as far as the disease is concerned. Okay. So while there is no useful way to see when structural breaks and the risks they bring will occur, pestle analysis is likely to raise questions like, what if? Okay, so that was the point I was making earlier. For some people, they will argue that if there will be structural breaks and black swans, then why should we engage in pestle analysis? After all, in spite of all the analysis that you do, you couldn't have predicted that COVID will come. Okay, if you were into the financial sector, instead of all your knowledge and whatever you have acquired about investment, you couldn't predict that DDEP could happen in Ghana. All right, so what is the point? Okay, and the answer is that at least it will help you address some of these issues. As you undertake the pestle analysis, you'll be asking yourself, what if? Okay, what if all these projections don't go as we expect? What will be the next thing? What will be the backup plan? What will be the plan B? All right, so pestle analysis will help you to think along that side than a firm that doesn't engage in pestle analysis at all. Okay, for them, they don't even think about the external environment, and therefore they don't even think about what if the analysis go wrong. All right. So downturns in the world economy occur every few years, and there have been 4 global recessions in the last 50 years. So it's an example. Every global recession is an example of black swans and structural breaks. Okay, they are normal things that nobody anticipated. They bring huge disruptions. In the investment world, they keep talking about the 1929, 1931, 32 global recessions and how the stock markets around the world, especially USA, crashed and so on and so forth. All right. So there are events and they won't stop. We just have to know as business managers that some of these structural breaks do happen, and in our strategic management processes, pay attention to that possibility as well. Okay. Then we move to industry life cycle. So I told you much earlier that the external environment is divided into 2. We have the macro and we have the micro. The macro is where the pestle framework can be found. The political, social, legal, and so on and so forth. They are there. But after you have analyzed that, that is not enough. As far as the external environment is concerned, you also have to understand the industry within which you are operating. All right. You need to, if you're into the banking industry, you need to know what is happening in the banking industry. If you're into oil and gas industry, you have to understand the oil and gas industry. Okay. So it is still external. It is not like you want to understand your own company, but you want to understand the industry, oil and gas. All right. And one tool that you can use to understand the industry is what is known as the industry life cycle. You want to know the stage at which the industry you are in is at. All right. So we have 4 stages similar to those of you with business background, the product life cycle. So you want to find out, is the industry at the introduction stage? Is it at the growth stage? Is it at the maturity stage? Is it at the decline stage? So we have different characteristics at each of these stages. And therefore, the type of strategies and the way you should run your company will be based on the stage of the industry within which you find yourself. All right. So you need to understand it. So at the introduction stage, in the beginning, production is low, costs are high, and demand is very low. There may be large variety of products and services and diverse organizations. So if you find yourself in an industry that is still at the introduction stage, these are the attributes. Okay, production is low, the cost of operating will be high, the demand will be very low. All right, and there'll be several products coming from diverse organizations. The important thing is not to know these things. The important thing is that after knowing this, how do you position yourself to survive, at least if you find yourself in an industry in the introduction stage? Okay, will it be worth huge investment in the form of promotion, or you should be thinking about doing other things at this stage of the industry? All right, then an industry can move from the introduction stage to the growth stage. Here, there is expansion that comes with more customers, there's more distributors and retailers as they become familiar with the new products and as supplier organizations gain experience and exploit greater economies of scale to offer lower prices. All right, so you want to find out whether your industry is at a growth stage. You want to find out whether your industry is at the maturity stage or your industry is at the decline stage. Why? I said the tactics, the strategies, and how to run businesses at each stage is different from the other. Okay, so you need to know, do industry analysis using the industry life cycle to know the stage of the industry that you are in, and therefore the type of strategies and tactics that you should be operating at that stage of the industry. Okay. Then we have what is known as the 5 competitive forces model. So under the micro environment, we have these two. We have the life cycle that will help us to understand the traits of each stage and the type of strategies we should be using. Then we have the 5 competitive forces model that will also help us to deal with some forces within the industry within which we find ourselves. And there are about 5. That's why it's known as the 5 competitive forces model. Okay, so the first one that you want to pay attention to is rivalry among existing competitors. So for every industry, I don't think there'll be any industry where you'll be allowed, unless of course it's a military regime and they have a monopoly. But you will normally have firms that will sell the same type of product or similar products and services as you sell. And you want to be mindful of whatever they do, okay? Because their decisions tends to have a direct and immediate impact on you. For example, if they choose to reduce the prices of their products and you're selling the same or similar type of product, rational consumers and customers can easily shift from your products to those of your rivals. So once they start reducing your prices, you want to be careful and find ways by which you can also reduce your prices, probably by reducing your cost of production. The same rivals, if they choose to improve the quality of their products, there also you are in trouble. If they choose to give any promotional incentives, okay, discounts, whatever, these are things that you always have to be mindful of, because if you don't pay attention to them, they can wipe you out of business. So that is the first force in the micro environment that you want to pay attention to. Okay, you want to pay attention to what is also referred to as the threat of new entrants. So this category are the companies and firms that are already in the industry with you. All right, but these are guys who also, they are watching you guys, and if they feel the industry is very profitable, they may want to come into that particular industry. Okay, the threats they bring are very similar to your competitors, your existing competitors. Because they are new entrants, if you are not fortunate, they may come out with better products, or they may come out with products that are cheaper than yours, or they may come with very heavy marketing and advertisement or promotional force. All of these factors that I've named can negatively affect your business. Okay, if they are selling better quality products at cheaper prices and they have invested in marketing, then you are almost wiped out. Okay, even though they are new, the possibility of them taking over market share is very, very high. So as part of your microenvironment, you want to pay attention to the threats of new entrants. Okay, you want to pay attention to what is known as the bargaining power of customers. All right, so the people that will be buying from you, your customers, what is the nature of the bargaining power they have? If they have high bargaining power over you, what it means is that they can eat into your profit. All right, yes. So if you're dealing with a class of customers that have high bargaining power and they can always negotiate the prices, then you are in trouble, and you should be thinking about ways by which you can produce at cheaper cost. Okay, your cost of production should be minimum so that you can match up with the bargaining power of your customers. Okay, the reverse is the case if you're dealing with an industry or clients that they don't have much bargaining power. Okay, like you guys that I'm selling my book to. All right, your bargaining power is near zero. It's your lecturer or teacher that says buy. Are you listening to me? It's your so Mustafa.
Prof,
Are you
yeah.
listening? So lecturer, whenever you have dominant servant relationship, that is what happens. The bargaining power becomes weaker. But if you're dealing with a clientele, customers that have heavy bargaining power, then you want to be more careful about your cost of production, okay? Because they have the ability to eat into your profit. And in the book, you'll see conditions or situations where customers will have more bargaining power, all right? If they are especially important, if you're dealing with customers, for example, they are celebrity, and for them, sometimes they are even paid to use certain products, to wear certain shirts, and so on and so forth. So if you are dealing with somebody very important, then they tend to have more bargaining power over you, okay? The same applies to if you're dealing with customers that buy in large volumes, then they also tend to have more bargaining power over you, because sometimes it makes sense to make 1 CD from a customer that will buy, say, 1 million units of your products than to be making 10 CD from somebody who buys only 10 or 100. All right, so that's the point. The bargaining power of suppliers is very similar to that. Okay, if you're dealing with suppliers that can sell inputs to you at higher prices and you cannot negotiate to beat down those prices, then that will also affect your cost of production. Okay, and so you want to find ways to deal with that particular problem. Okay, one strategy is to use what is known as backward integration, where instead of actually buying from the suppliers, you will now be the one producing your own inputs or raw materials. All right. So when we're dealing with strategies, we'll look at those types of strategies. Right. Then the last one is to pay attention to the threat of substitute products and services. Okay. The threats. So it's very similar to maybe new entrants, existing ones. And I think I paid, was it this class that I spent time explaining the real meaning of substitute instead of brands? And there were examples like Pepsodent and Colgate. Was it here?
No,
Was
please.
it oh, okay. So I normally say that when we talk about substitute, normally we think about different brands of the same type of product. All right. So in that class, I asked the question about substitute, and they were mentioning names like Pepsodent, Colgate, Close Up, and brands of toothpaste. All right. And I said that yes, they are substitute, loosely speaking, but the real meaning of substitute is where you can use something that is radically different from that brand or that product, but it can serve the same purpose. Okay. So can you guys help me? What are the substitutes based on what I've said? substitute for toothpaste. So now I don't want the different brands. I want proper substitutes.
You can talk about black charcoal powder.
Chewing stick.
We can talk about.
Black charcoal powder.
Speak loudly. Speak loudly, Mustafa.
Black charcoal powder.
Ah, you are in the library. I now remember. black charcoal powder, right?
Yes.
Is it? Can you just use that, or you need something else?
You can use it direct.
You can use it direct.
Yes, with the brush.
Okay.
Yes, Prof.
With the brush.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
fine.
Prof.
That's fine. And which one is cheaper? Is it the Pepsodent or the black charcoal powder?
The powder.
The powder is
powder
cheaper.
Yes.
Okay. And I heard another word too. Another substitute.
Of chewing stick.
Chewing stick. Chewing stick and paste. Which one is cheaper?
Chewing stick. Chewing stick is cheaper.
Good. So that is what we really mean by substitute products. Okay. So when you are doing your competitive forces analysis, don't just pay attention to the different brands of your product, but pay attention to real substitutes. If the substitutes are of better quality, the reason why these guys won't pay attention to probably chewing stick is that we all know the inconvenience that comes with using it. All right. If you were in a village somewhere and time is not important, then you can resort to chewing stick. But if you find yourself in a city where you have to rush to work and all that, you won't think about it. But if you can find substitutes that are cheaper, that are of better quality, that serve the needs of the customer better, then you are in trouble. Okay? Then it's easy because there is no any cost in switching from your product to that of the substitute. All right. So you want to pay attention to what is known as the threats of substitute products and services. Are there new products coming up that can serve the same purpose as your product, but those products sell at cheaper prices, and probably those products or services are of better quality? If that is the case, then you are in trouble. All right. And you need to find an antidote to that as early as possible. Okay. So this analysis or this discussion plus the industry life cycle will help you to understand the micro, okay, environment of the external environment of any business. All right. So let's just run through some two concepts quickly. So we have what is known as hyper competition. Okay, Haruna.
Prof, with the 5 competitive forces model, no?
Yes.
Does it, let's say, an industry where the company which has monopoly, like let's say our utility sector, like this.
Yeah.
The electricity company is a monopoly, the water sector is a monopoly. Does these factors also affect them?
No. So if you find yourself in a monopolistic environment, they may not to be relevant for you. Okay. Because you won't be worried about any of these things. All right. Of course, unless with substitute, right? Because water, people can dig their own wells, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think their costs, with the comparing the both of their costs.
Yeah, for most people, the cost may deter them. But if you do very deep analysis, it's just the initial cost that may be expensive. If you can foot that in the long term, it will make an economic sense to have your own water than to buy from maybe Ghana Water Company. Okay. But that analysis, that same argument may not be true for, say, electricity, because I think at all times the cost of buying fuel to power your generators, unless of course with the solar here initially, just like water thing, may be cheaper, but in the long term initially may be expensive, but in the long term cheaper. Whatever be the case, what I'm saying is that most of these points may not be so much applicable to once you are operating as a monopoly. Okay. So if you paid attention to the heading, you see that it's about the 5 competitive forces. So it's meant for companies that are in competition with others. All right. If you have competitors, then you want to be more mindful of these variables. Okay. Good. But I like the question. That means you guys are following. So we have the concept of hyper competition. It's basically talking about the fact that you may find yourself in an industry where the competition is so rapid. All right. If this technology, things keeps just changing and changing and changing. And some are of the view that if you find yourself in this industry, having a long-term strategic plan may not even be necessary because things keep changing by the day or by the week or by the month. Okay. And long-term strategic plans are like 10 years, 5-year planning. So why bother and spend a lot of time? And that what is really necessary, okay, for a business to survive is for it to be nimble, quick, and able to learn as change happens. All of this can replace quick, right? You just have to be fast on your feet and react to changes in the external environment. But whatever be the case, whether it's hyper competition or normal competition, you need to pay attention to the external environment in order to adjust your operations to suit whatever is happening in the environment. Okay. Then let's look at our last concept, I guess, strategic fit. Okay, so the reason why you need to understand your environment, that is the external environment, whether through the PESTEL framework, the industry life cycle, or the 5 competitive forces, as I've said earlier, is now to find how to match your strengths with the opportunities that you may find in the environment. Okay, so there are the opportunities and threats suggested by PESTEL, the industry life cycle, and the 5 competitive forces have to be assessed against the strengths and weaknesses of the organization's internal environment. So you want to find out, and conducting this and doing this and that, you want to find out where you may find opportunities and where threats may emanate. Okay, and you want to do so because you want to find what is known as strategic fit. How well can you use your strengths probably to take advantage of the opportunities that you have found? Or how well can you use your strength to curb the threats from the external environment? Okay, how well can you use your strength to cover your weaknesses in order to deal with threats and so on and so forth? So you want to find a strategic fit. What opportunity have you found? And which of the strengths of your organization, internal strengths, can you use to capitalize on the opportunities that you found in the external environment? So if you do the matching of your opportunities with your internal capabilities or strengths, that is where you may find what is known as what? Strategic fit. Okay, right. So that is one aspect. You do the analysis based on the PESTEL, the industry life cycle, the 5 forces, and then try to do your internal analysis, find out where your strengths lie, and probably use your strength to take advantage of the opportunities that you found. Okay, so that is one way by which you can get what is known as strategic fit. All right. Then there is this other way. Strategic fit also exists whenever one or more activities comprising the value chains of different businesses are sufficiently similar to present opportunities for. So if you're dealing with group of companies, was it here that we use despite group of companies as example? Despite. And we said which companies were under despite?
We have the best point service and loans, and we have the
we spoke about despite media, we spoke about best points, savings and loans. What again? Yes, needs, fufu. Is that all? This okay, all of that will be under food. right? So let's say they are all food, okay? Or if we separate this way, chocolate drink, right, from neat fufu. So yes, so that is where we're saying that if you find yourself in a company that is a group and have several businesses under that, you may also find a competitive fit in some areas. All right. So let's look at some areas where there may be competitive fit. First, there is possible to transfer competitive valuable resources, expertise, technological know-how, or other opportunities from one business to another. Okay. So when we're talking about neat fufu and this way, they are all into the food industry or business. So what we mean is that there may be some valuable resources, some expertise, and technological know-how. So if we assume that the technology that is used in neat fufu, okay, some of the same type of technology could be used in, say, manufacturing this way. This is just an example. Then you realize that that particular group of company will not have to buy different sets of technology for these different sets of business. All right. The better way to put it is, I know they have television, UTV, isn't it? And Peace FM falls under Despite. Is that the case?
Yes, please.
Good. So yes, it is very likely that the type of equipment or technology that is used, say, in doing the production as far as TV is concerned, may be similar to those that are used in, say, FM station. All right. And because they are all under the same group, instead of buying different technology or equipment for UTV and also buying the same set of equipment for Peace FM, it is possible that the one technology can be used to serve these two different types of businesses. All right. So the cost will be lower or cheaper for the Despite group of companies because they are able to transfer valuable resources, expertise, and technological know-how. When we talk about expertise, using the same example, most times the skill set that is needed by the employees that work, say, on television may be very similar to those that work on radio stations. All right. Both of them require somebody who has a very good voice, who is articulate, who is not scared of the camera, and so on and so forth. So if you have paid attention to the media guys, most of them will be working. They have some aspects of their work that involves being on radio, and that sometimes the same guys will then move to, say, television. It's the same thing with the Joy FM brands. All right. So one time the same guy is on radio, another time he's hosting a show on television. Why? Because the expertise that are needed are very similar, whether it's radio or television. So if it is the same company, instead of employing different set of people for, say, radio and different set for television, you can employ the same guys and just pay them some extra incentive so that they can be working for you both at the radio and also at the television. So that is what we mean by strategic fit. Okay. You can share valuable resources, you can share expertise, you can share technological know-how or other opportunities from one business to another. All right. The rest of the points are very similar. There can also be cost sharing between separate businesses where value chain activities can be combined. Okay, so if we pick the technology, instead of buying separate equipment for the TV and separate for the FM station, if there's a technology that can be used by both TV and radio, you'll just buy one, all right? And that is cost sharing, all right? You can use the same thing for your TV business and you can use the same thing for your radio business. That becomes cost sharing. All right. They can also share brand. So brand sharing between business units who have common customers or that draw upon common core competencies. Yes, once again, the television and the radio example comes to fore. Okay, so branding, if you pick the media, despite media, their branding is their strength lies in the local languages. All right, is that not the case? I think that is it, right? Especially Twi. Okay, so if you are somebody who is interested in getting your info in Twi or the local languages, then you want to stay with despite media. And so if it is television, all things being equal, you prefer UTV. And if it is radio, you are likely to prefer Peace FM. Why? Because they have managed to share the same type of brand. They have been able to register themselves with the same type of or similar type of product or service. All right. So that is the other way by which companies, and in this context, we are talking about companies that have multi-businesses under them. Okay, that is how they can get what we call strategic fit. Okay. Good. We have strategy. Any questions before we move on? This slide is very, very similar to what we've just discussed. All right. So we have strategy fit and economies of scope. All right. So strategy fit in the value chain activities of a diversified corporation's different businesses opens up opportunities for economies of scope, a concept distinct from economies of scale. Okay, I hope we've heard about economies of scale over and over again, but we also have what is known as economies of scope. Okay, so economies of scale are cost savings that accrue directly from a larger operation. So economies of scale, once you produce in larger volumes, you tend to have some benefits. And those benefits are known as the economies of scale. For example, if you buy in large volumes, you are likely to attract much higher discounts, okay? Or if you produce in larger volumes, you are likely to beat down your fixed cost, and therefore your unit cost may come down, and so on and so forth. So those are examples of economies of scale, all right? But economies of scales, however, stem directly from cost-saving strategic fits along the value chains of related businesses. So what we've discussed earlier, okay, these points that we've explained earlier are those that brings up what is known as the economies of scope, okay? The fact that you can share certain resources, you can share brand, you can share employees, all right? Those benefits comes as a result of the fact that you have separate and different businesses working under the same group, okay? Such economies are opened only to a multi-business enterprise, so the group of companies. And as a result of related diversification strategy that allows sibling businesses, otherwise businesses that are similar, to share technology and probably perform research and development activities together. Okay, so that's the difference between the economies of scope and economies of scale. So economies of scale you can benefit from it if you are just a single company, all right, and you produce in larger quantities. Once you buy in large quantities, you can attract more discounts, as I said earlier, okay? You may be able to produce in larger volumes and therefore beat down your cost of production and so on and so forth. But you will not enjoy the other benefits if you were a group of companies. Okay, so the benefits that come because you have multi-businesses under one company is what is known as the economies of scope. Okay, is it clear? Any question? Any questions so far? Okay, if there are no questions, let's jump to our last part. So we have classifications of strategic fit, and I think we've touched on all of that already. So we have market-related fit, occurs where companies reach the same customers via similar distribution channels. So if you were separate distinct companies, you may have to spend money, all right, on separate those distribution channels. But because you're in the same group of company, you can use the same channel. If we use a simplistic example like a vehicle, right? This huge vehicles that will distribute the products to retailers and so on and so forth. If you had, say, soaps like Unilever, right? We assume the soap is a different business, oils are different, detergents, so on and so forth. They probably will have needed different cars if they were not related under the same company. They will need this different means of transportation to distribute this. But because they are all under Unilever, the same vehicle can have all of these products under one vehicle for the distribution purposes, all right? If there's adverts, they may choose to advertise Unilever as a brand, and that will cover all the sub companies under them, instead of doing advert for the different separate products that the company has. Okay, so that is the example that I want us to know. Then we have operating fit. So there will be cost sharing and skill transfer opportunities. We've explained that using television and radio. All right, the guys, I always say the only difference is probably you have to be nice, you have to be beautiful or handsome, right, to be on television. But the others are the same in terms of the quality of your voice, in terms of your confidence in the way you articulate issues, and all the other attributes are the same, whether you are on radio or television. So there could be operating fit. And finally, there could be management fit. All right. If we treated the strategic business unit and the Unilever as separate companies, okay, what it means is that they will have required managers, human resource manager, production, whatever, for each of their products. Or if you even pick the despite, or if you pick, say, what again? Joy FM. What is the name of the? I think they are called multimedia, right? Multimedia. Yes. So you'll normally know that you'll know that they have noticed that they have, say, group manager. Okay. They have some name. They lost one gentleman recently, and he was the one in charge. Okay. If you pick the radio, if you pick the television, he was their business development manager or something of that sort. Okay. Recently, he passed. All right. So instead of employing separate managers for all these separate businesses, you can have the same managerial team that will be in charge of the separate businesses under that group. Okay. So that is the management fit. Those are the different classifications of strategic fit that we may find. So you may have marketing related fit, you may have operating or operational related fit, then we have the management related strategic fit. Okay, are we fine? Are there any questions?
We are fine.
Okay.